Promised you a special guest on the show today, and I have come through because he has come through. He is the Director of Intercollegiate Athletics at the University of Louisiana, which is a long title for saying he's the AD. Scott Farmer is our guest this afternoon. Appreciate you coming in. You've had a pretty tight schedule, between all the vacation time you're taking and then all the other things that you have to do.
Yeah, I actually did get a week off this year. It was my wife and I's 25th wedding anniversary, and took a week off for the first time since the week we got married.
Really?
So I think she deserved that. She probably deserves a whole lot more, in fact.
Oh, there ain't no question she deserves a whole lot more. I did see one picture of you with a fishing rod. I can't call it a fishing pole. It was a whole lot bigger than that. With a fishing rod in your hand. Did you catch anything while you were up there?
Yeah, I caught the bait. Every time I reeled it in, it still had bait on it. So I caught the bait, had a great time. We went up to Alaska, and we did that one little fishing excursion, and it did not catch many fish, but it did turn out to be a great wildlife excursion. Lots of whales and sea lions and otters and bears and eagles. It was a beautiful day. It turned out to be a great time.
So have you talked to my boss about the king salmon that he caught?
Well, I have not yet, even though he went the week after I was up that way.
Right.
So, no, I haven't. And I know several people on that trip with him, too. So I can't wait to hear about it all.
They can't wait to hear about the bait that you caught. Gosh, football season's almost here. It's been a short summer. I don't know about for you, okay? But for me, it just seems like the last out of the baseball season was made, just like a week or so ago. And now we're just a couple of weeks away from football.
Every year it seems to be getting a shorter and shorter amount of time to be ready for football. And you're right. They're here and they're out there working hard. In fact, just coming over here today, just a few minutes ago, I was talking to our head athletic trainer, just about two-a-days and what they're going through and how everybody's doing. And talked to the strength coach a little bit a while ago earlier in the morning, I guess. And, it's here. Believe me, they're out there working hard. Soccer's here. Volleyball starts tomorrow. I mean, it's here.
The season opener comes on September the 3rd. And since you and I talked last, which was at Sunbelt Conference Media Days, the official announcement's been made that we're going to have an 11 a.m. kickoff for the season opener against Boise State. That game is going to be televised on the American Sports Network. And I know that there are a lot of folks, and I'm in this boat, that don't understand quite how this ASN thing came about, how they got involved, and how they're getting to dictate kickoff times and stuff. Can you help me with this?
Okay, yeah, I think I can summarize it pretty quickly. Our media rights, our television media rights, first priority goes to ESPN.
Correct.
Okay, they can pick dates and times and all that. All right, the second round of picks, the second choice, if you will, goes to ESPN3, which shows that's two different contracts. And then the third pick used to go to, your local stations or anybody locally or on campus that would want to broadcast. What ASN has done, they have come in and subleased inventory from ESPN, the first pick. Okay? There's a contract now between ESPN and ASN, American Sports Network, that they now get to pick games really in the second slot, if you will. Well, it's really the third slot, I guess. But they're picking games, and the only caveat to it is they have to put the games on ESPN3 also. So they're really taking inventory away from ESPN as far as having to produce it. But the same amount of, I shouldn't say taking inventory away, they're taking expense away because they don't have to produce the games anymore, but the games are still being shown on ESPN3. So that is why when it comes time to a date or a time, it goes all the way back to the first contract with ESPN, and they have the right to pick days and times. Now, the only reason they didn't get their exact way with the Boise game.
They wanted a 2 o'clock kickoff, right?
They wanted 2:30.
2:30.
They wanted 2:30 kickoff, yes. The reason they didn't get that exact way, and we got a chance to argue with them a little bit, is because they missed the June 1st deadline. By contract, the first 3 weeks of the season must be set by June 1st, and they missed that time period. So we were able to negotiate with them just a little bit. Now, the rest of the season, weeks 4 through 13, you have a 14-day window, or 12-day window. So they can pick prior to that 12-day window. They can move your game to Friday night, Thursday night. They can play it whatever time they want. So our fans need to know that it is still possible games going in the last half of the season may be moved.
The game against South Alabama has already been designated as one that's going to be shown on American Sports Network. I happened to look at their website about a week ago. They had it as a 2:30 kickoff. You have it as a TBA. Is there a negotiation going on there?
Actually, it's been settled, and that should be released today. It's not going to be on the American Sports Network anymore because we would not agree to play at 2:30. And so it will go back to the original time. We actually had set it at 6 o'clock.
You had
a while
set it
ago,
at 6 o'clock, yes.
And then it moved to TBA because ASN was trying to pick it up. But the only time they would pick it up is at 2:30, and we just would not agree to play that game at 2:30. So let's go all the way back. We're 11 o'clock the first week. Coach Hudspeth and I are excited about that. We really could have gone 11 or 2:30. We just think 2:30 is just too hot. From the time you arrive at the stadium till the time you leave, it's just going to be brutally hot. By playing at 11, you got a chance to get there and maybe get in the game before it gets hot. And we're going to do some things we can talk about later for the fans to try to increase the comfort level and have some cooling stations and stuff like that there. And then the second game, the one against McNeese, will be at 6. And then the South Alabama game will also be at 6.
Any word from Tulane yet on what they're going to do? I know on their website it said either 6 or 7 p.m.
That's the last word I got right there. Has not been set to my knowledge.
Okay. Season tickets are on sale right now. You know, you're coming off a 4-8 season and you're in a pretty brutal time economically in this city. How are season tickets running right now?
Yeah, we're a little bit behind right now. I got a report this morning. So I encourage our fans to get out there and buy tickets. And if you want to move around, there's some seats available for the first time in several years. There's some seats available on the west side of the stadium, some chairback seats. If fans want to move around, I encourage you to go to the Cajun Dome and do it now. But we're over 2,000 tickets behind, so we have some work to do.
You have some work to do, and you've got, I guess, about 3 more weeks to get it done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we'll sell, even after the first game, I think we'll sell some more season tickets getting ready for the second and third game.
So you're hoping that you're going to be somewhere in the ballpark at least?
We certainly hope so. You know, you're right. It's a very challenging economic times. We were down season tickets last year for the first time in 6 years. So that was kind of a shock, but it is. It's a sign of the times, and it's a tough deal out there, and I certainly understand why some people have to cut back.
The Boise State game, is it, even though it's not going to be at 2:30 in the afternoon, it's still going to be pretty warm. And you said that you're trying to work some things out to make things a little bit easier on fans. The folks that I always think about are the fans on the east side of the stadium, because those are the guys that are in direct sunlight. Now, both sides are going to be in direct sunlight at 11 a.m., yeah. All right? But as the day goes by, I don't know, maybe by 2:30, 3 o'clock, you got the home team in the shade if they're still playing at that time. But fans on the east side are going to be subjected to some pretty hot conditions. Yeah,
we just are going to have to hope for a little bit of clouds that day, and maybe we can get through it. But we just know that the last time the Cajuns played at 2:30 at home several years ago, it was just brutally hot, and we just couldn't agree to do that.
No, I agree with you. I remember it was in 2010, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and I was in an air-conditioned press box, and I was miserable, not to mention the kids on the field with that turf where temperatures got to over 125 degrees. It was there's a fine line, and I told somebody this on the radio show last week. There's a fine line between home field advantage and putting your student athletes at risk.
Yeah, and it's not just student athletes. If you remember, we transported several band members that day after the halftime performance, and just several people overall had some heat-related issues. So we'll try to prepare for those. But, like I said, Coach is excited about it. It's he likes early start times. First of all, you're not sitting around a hotel all day long. And it'll be a shock to I don't care what time we play it. It's going to be a shock to them. It's going to be a little hotter than they're used to.
On the show this afternoon, we're going to talk a little bit about see if we can get a little bit of an update on the project at Tigue Moore Field. We're going to talk a little bit about conference expansion and realignment and where we stand with that, and more as well. Scott Farmer is our guest on the show this afternoon. Bird's Eye View continues in a minute on ESPN 1420 and .com.
He would never say he's smarter than you. He just assumes you already know. It's Bird's Eye View with Jay Walker on Sports Radio ESPN 1420.
ESPN 1420 and ESPN1420.com. We welcome you back to Bird's Eye View. Jay Walker, along with Ragin Cajun Athletic Director Scott Farmer. The Tigue Moore project, we've had, it reminds me of the old Edwin Starr song. You've got destruction and then construction. The grandstand's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. Now, I haven't seen a photo in the last couple of 3 days. Have we started actual construction yet, or are there a few things that are still going on? And you may not know because you moved offices.
Right.
You're not there anymore.
I was just about to say that. You know, I left town last Thursday, got back Sunday, and while I was gone, offices moved to the Whittington House. And for our fans and our season ticket holders and our RCF donors, that's the house right next to Blackham Coliseum across from Fatima, the old White House there. So that's where we are now. And no, I haven't been over there to see what construction has been done in the last few days. I
have kind of a policy. I don't second guess people because the dumbest folks in the world are usually smarter than I am. I do first guess sometimes, and I did some first guessing back when all of this finally came to light and the announcement was finally made, and it was before I went on vacation. That was finally made that all funding had been secured. The project was a go. The RCAF, while I was on vacation, issued a statement. But before I went on vacation, there were some things that I suggested, and you should have listened to the show that day because I could have helped you. You know, since all of that happened, you've done an in-depth interview with Tim Buckley, with the Advertiser. You did about a 15-minute interview, I guess about a week ago, with another radio station, and you're spending an hour with me today. Wouldn't it have just been easier just to hold a press conference, answer everybody's questions, be done with it?
Well, like I said, I think in both of those two references there, in hindsight, yeah, I think everyone would shake their head up and down and say yes. But in real time, as it was unfolding, it literally was, look, today is Tuesday. It's going to be done Thursday, or it's going to be done Friday at noon. Let's just put the everything out at that time. And then, of course, Friday would come and something would be a little glitch or something else would have to be worked out, and it was Monday. Hey, it's going to be done Monday, 8 o'clock in the morning. We have a meeting. And it just kept going like that. And every time, the lawyers really thought that everything would be done and we could announce it, but there was a little hang-up. And so the university, the decision in the room was we really do want to wait until everything is done and we can get exactly what is moving forward. And so, yes, I think if anyone would have known it was going to be, an extra 2, 4, 6 weeks, yeah, I think everyone would have said, let's put a statement out.
Well, and
by the way, the statement was prepared many times during that time period.
Oh, I'm sure that's true. But once the announcement was made, rather than have to sit with Buckley, sit with me, sit with Dave, sit with everybody else, just hold a press conference. Okay, here's what happened. Now I'll take some questions, and you take a few questions, and then you're done. But you're doing, and I appreciate the fact that you're in here.
I wouldn't be on this show, Jay.
Well, maybe we'd get onto something else. But at any rate, that was my suggestion, and there's nothing in your contract that says you have to listen to me. It had to have been. I know it was frustrating to fans. It was frustrating to me as a fan, and I'm sure frustrating to you as the athletic director. About, okay, we're going to be able to announce it. No, we can't announce it yet. We're going to be able to announce it. Was this wording of contracts? Was this the actual delay in getting approved? How much of this had to do with the UL system and pleasing them? I mean, is that what all this delay was about? That after the 1st of May, let's say, or the middle of May?
It's anytime you get 3 or 4 parties in the room with 3 or 4 different sets of lawyers, with each one of those maybe having 2 or 3 lawyers on their team, so to speak.
Did you sit in on any of this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's a lot of people in the room, and that's a lot of legal opinions in the room, and it's a process to go through it. I mean, the good news is we always felt, number one, that our administration backed it and wanted it to happen. That's number one. And that gave us a little bit of comfort to sleep.
If anybody talks to Tony Robichaux, that's the first thing going to come out of his, because the first thing came out of his mouth when he talked to me. In our economic times that we have right now, the president didn't have to say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes. Okay, it's something I think a lot of people take for granted.
Absolutely, and I think number two, then I think everybody in the room wanted it to get done, and that's a big deal also. When you have everybody trying to get to the same outcome, it was just a matter of people smarter than me and trying to figure out the right way and make sure every I was dotted and every T was crossed. And so, was it frustrating we didn't get to announce? Yes. Was it frustrating that the whole process? No, because I knew it was moving forward and we knew it was going to get done.
Back in, I don't know, toward the end of last year, I guess, between the talks about making some improvements to the original design of Tigue Moore Field, along with cost overruns and everything else, we found out that the project that was a $10 million project became a $13, $14, $15, $16 million project. I remember there was a show that we did together where you said you had about $7 million in pledges, or $7 million secured, I think was the word that was said. And that didn't mean you had $7 million in the bank. It said that you had $7 million between actual contributions and pledges for the project. $7 million obviously doesn't equate to 16. And I guess my question to you here, and it's the part about this whole process I don't understand, is back in December, the realization came it was going to be a $16 million project, and it seemed, and if I'm wrong on this, tell me, and then we didn't start securing funds until toward the end of the baseball season. What happened in the interim period? Why did somebody not say, guys, we better go see about getting the money on this thing?
Well, a couple things in there that may not be 100% accurate. First of all, the original project construction document was $10 million. That is actual. Of course, that is just the contractor's contract.
Correct.
All right, so that did not include some of the soft costs like your architect and your FF&E and those types of things that the university pays for. So the project was always going to be more than $10 million. I would tell you that was probably 13-ish roughly, which that meant we knew we were going to have to borrow some money. Absolutely. All right. And then as the project kept going, I did not know, and Dr. Savoy and I did not know in December that it was going to be $16 million. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you. It was in the springtime before that number ever crossed my desk. And of course, and it was kind of interesting. He and I just had a conversation the day before about it. And we didn't know what the number was, so that's what prompted it. So we started working a little bit more aggressively on that time at trying to find the right funding source to keep the project going. Because Tony's right. The president did not have to say yes to that, but he wanted to say yes. And so, we ended up with about $9 million raised. And correct, that's not all in the bank. Some of that is pledged over time. So we knew we had to borrow some money. So we went out and we got that bridge funding to cover whether we raise some more money or not. We will be covered to get this project done.
When did you and the president, and I understand that neither one of you are involved in the day-to-day thing on this. He's got a university to run. You're in athletics, and now we're talking about projects, fundraising, and all that other stuff. Because there was something that circulated, or at least at a baseball meeting, all the way back at the end of last year, where that $16 million figure was thrown out, and so I'm going back. When did you and T-Joe actually find out? Yes, this is the cost, because that number's been floating around for a while now.
Like I say, I don't. It was in the spring. That's all I can tell you. I don't remember if it was in March or if it was in April, but it was in the springtime. I don't know, but I know this. We started working on it immediately at that point in time. We had
Now, of course, there was a document, I think, that started circulating around, and you know how stuff circulates around, that suggested according to the contractor, that demolition was to be completed by the 30th of June. And the demolition, of course, was completed around the 26th of July, whatever it was. Almost a month later. Does that mean that the target date for occupancy is pushed back an entire month?
Well, I guess if you're going to look at a document that was created before construction, it's a guide, if you will, then yeah, you could say it's going to be delayed a month. All right, but the contractor is going to be a little bit more realistic in setting that occupancy date as the stadium progresses, as he gets through. This demolition was one part, then to see if there's any surprises underground, and then the weather, hurricane season coming. So as we move into November, December, we're going to have a much more realistic time that the contractor thinks we can get in. So Tony and I are starting to make some contingency plans at this point in time. But again, I'm not all that concerned on today's date. I want a more realistic date as construction progresses.
Okay, when obviously contingency play, you got to plan ahead. Okay, there's a baseball season. You can't postpone the season.
That's
okay,
right.
The season's going to come, and that's the way it is. Today, on August, whatever this is, today.
9th.
Yeah, thanks. On August the 9th, are you optimistic that we'll be playing baseball at Tigue Moore Field by the time conference play starts in Week 5?
I think it's going to be around that time. I mean, that's just look. You're asking me to pull a date out of the hat.
Yes, I am. And while everybody else may hold you to this date, I'm not going to.
They definitely will if I say that. So I do think it'll be around that time. I'm hoping. Obviously we're all hoping, but. I can't answer specifically, but that's kind of what we're leaning towards.
Yeah, and optimistic doesn't mean you're making a promise. I just was curious as to if I gave you that date, would you at least right now feel semi-comfortable with it? Yeah.
Well, what I do feel comfortable with is I think we have a contractor that is a Ragin Cajun first and foremost, and obviously from this area and supports the university and supports the athletic department, and is going to do everything they can to get this project done in a timely manner, and that means a lot. They're a very good contractor, and they'll work very hard to get it done as quickly as possible. And the other thing they will do then, within reason, is they'll work to let us occupy what can be occupied as long as it can be done safely. Maybe before it's 100% done.
Yeah, I think the date of occupancy and date of completion could easily be two different dates.
Absolutely.
And in fact, every time that I know about any sort of thing like this, whether it be at Middle Tennessee or South Alabama or a couple of other places, date of occupancy and date of completion were not the same date.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And so, I think they'll work with us in that regard too. So that's why I say we're gonna start making plans. But the reality is, it'll be probably November, December before I think we can get a pretty specific date.
Sometimes timing is everything. You and I think I don't remember which interview it was. I think it was the Tim Buckley interview, because I think I read this as opposed to hearing it. That you said you were looking at contingencies. You were looking at all sorts of different possibilities as to what happens if, and that one of the possibilities was Faubacker Field. Now, this came about a day after someone that works for the university at the RCAF thing said, "Ain't no way we're going to play a game at Faubacker Field." I would think that would be the situation you don't want to be in, because there's a lesser seating capacity there. Getting in and out is not easy over on La Nouvelle Road.
Absolutely.
What options, though, if you get to week 4 and you don't have, it's not ready for occupancy, what other options might you have besides that? I think Zephyr Field got mentioned.
That's one.
The boys down the road 50 miles, are they in town that weekend? I don't know.
Oh, I have not looked at that one yet. That's an interesting one. We have not looked there yet. But there's a lot of things that can be done to Faubacker or any smaller venue, that you can bring in plenty of very nice seats. You can bring in sky boxes. There's all kinds of things you can do to dress up a venue to make it. Don't get me wrong. Nothing's going to be perfect. I can assure you that. And the disadvantage, you mentioned a great one. Even if we could get the number of people to Faulbacher that we want, you're right, parking is going to be a problem. On the other hand, is going all the way to New Orleans what our fans really want us to do, too. We have to weigh that. So
weekends in New Orleans aren't bad.
And if we had to do one, that might be a good option. So, but I don't think we want to do several. So those are things that we will continue to explore.
Scott Farmer, Ragin Cajun Athletic Director, is our guest. Another thing that has been right in the middle, I guess, of the news lately has been the possibility of the Big 12 Conference expanding. This thing changes every day. You and I spoke not on the air, but off the air about, because this was kind of fresh news, and you said you thought that they might expand by 4 teams. Carl Benson, I spoke with him. He kind of thought that too, and then there was an article about ESPN and Fox kind of pushing back on that, and I predicted then that the compromise was going to be they were going to add 2, and then I read today that Cincinnati and Houston are kind of moving ahead of BYU because of BYU's stance on some social issues that don't jibe with the Big 12 Constitution. What are you hearing?
First of all, it's fluid doesn't even describe the situation, okay? And one of the reasons is because there's not a lot of direct information coming out of the Big 12. Instead, it's a lot of speculation, and you read this and you read that.
And great journalism.
And trying to figure out if it is speculation or if it's actual facts. So I think a couple things. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. This isn't anything new. The Big 12 is being rumored to have expanded, needing to expand for 3 years now, 4 years?
At least.
So what is new? Well, what is new is that the conference did give the commissioner approval to go start looking at possible suitors to the conference. That's the only thing that's new. They have not actually themselves voted, that I know of, if it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 20. I don't know. As
a matter of fact, what I read is that right now nobody's got the 8 votes necessary, and there's going to have to be a lot of wheeling and dealing and compromising done in order to get 2.
And from what I know professionally, inside that room, it's a very decisive. You're on one side or the other. There's not many people on the fence, so it's going to be interesting to see if someone gets 8 votes. So that's the first thing. But that does lead shows like this to be able to kind of open the floor up, get people's opinions, and talk about it. So that is why you're starting to get, again, a lot of information out there that's saying 2, saying 4. Very interesting development when it was brought forward that ESPN and Fox, 2 of their TV partners, are not very happy with this potential expansion. And the reason they're not happy is that their contract, the present contract, calls for those 2 entities to pay the conference more for every member that's in the league. So obviously they're paying X amount with 10 members. Well, they'd have to pay more with 12 and more with 14. And that didn't make either one of those 2 happy, to the tune of about $100 million a year more for a contract that lasts 8 more years. That's $800 million those 2 entities would have to pay should they increase by 4. So obviously they didn't like that very much. So there's some negotiation going on. Well, maybe they'll compromise at 2 and go ahead and increase the television buyout or payouts a little bit more also, so everybody kind of gets a little bit better of a deal. So now, who? That's a great question, and I know we got all the way back to what you originally asked me. Who? I think that you're absolutely right. BYU is probably the best name out there, probably the best all-around department out there. Yeah, they have some social stigmas right now. So that's going to be interesting. They're basically an independent. So if BYU's chosen, there's not going to be much trickle down in that realm. So then the next one on the table is probably either Cincinnati or Houston. And of course, if either one or both of those go, then there would be potentially some trickle down. But I think that's the other thing that probably needs to be further discussed is, will there really be trickle down?
Well, I guess at some point in time we're going to find out, but it certainly does raise questions. And I think that, the last time that we really had this discussion was, 3 or 4 years ago. And things change in 3 or 4 years. You've been quoted a couple of times as saying some things that I think, folks maybe didn't like what you had to say. In a recent interview, you kind of clarified that. I want to get past that and move on. Is the American Conference the goal of this university, I guess, is the way I want to say this? Is that the ultimate goal where you want to be, understanding you're not going to be in the Big 12 anytime soon?
Well, that's how you got to answer the question, though. I don't think it would be our ultimate goal. I don't think that's our end-all goal, but it might be the next goal.
Okay. Is that the next goal?
I would think that's probably a fair thing to say, yes.
Can you get to the American Conference without making a stop in Conference USA, in your professional opinion?
That's a tough one. I don't know how to answer that. It would be tough to do. I don't know that it's impossible, but I think it would be tough to do.
Have you had any direct contact with anybody at the American Conference or Conference USA since all of this started? Oh, yeah,
absolutely. We talk to them. I don't want to say talk to them every day, but we reach out to ones that we know in the league. And
how about the conference office? Have you talked to the commissioners?
I personally have not spoken to the commissioner, but I have spoken to associate commissioners that I know.
What kind of feedback do you get from these folks when you do talk to them? We have our own perception of who we are. Other people have their perception of who we are. Obviously, dialogue is how you get your perception and their perception to maybe meet somewhere to where you find out exactly who you are. What is the feedback that you get when you talk to folks from CUSA or folks from the American as to what this university is right now and where do you need to get better?
Much, much, much different feedback today than we got 4 or 5 years ago. Significantly different. We had a lot of challenges 4 or 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and that's something that this department has worked at every day to try to check some of those off the list, so they're not negatives on us anymore. So to answer your question, as we're making phone calls today, number one, a lot of them have been here and seen for themselves the changes that have come down. Some of them have been online, and of course, some of them we have to prod to get online and see some of these changes. And quite honestly, they're kind of shocked because you're right. We have a perception of who we are in the pecking order, and a lot of people still have that perception of, let's just say, the 90s or the early 2000s. And it's just a much different university and a much different department than we were at that time.
Has anybody, and again, it's very difficult because you're talking about two different leagues here, but has anybody said to you after, whether it be an athletic director or perhaps Dr. Savoie talking to other university presidents, because after all, they're the ones that are going to make that decision at some point in time, or the folks that you have talked to in administration at other leagues that have said to you, you're not ready for our league?
No, I've never had anyone say that in the last 24 months. I think we had before, but I haven't had anyone in the last 24 months. I think it'd probably be prudent, Jay, to talk just briefly about what do they look for? What do the presidents or the athletic directors or conference offices look for when they're looking to expand and bring someone into their league? And quite honestly, it's a pretty in-depth review of your institution. They look at everything. I mean, they're going to look on the institutional side to your enrollment. They're going to look at the number of degrees you offer. They're going to look at the number of graduate students you have. They're going to look at the number of alums you have. They're going to look at the number of active alums that you have, as giving to the Alumni Association, what have you. They put all this stuff on paper into a spreadsheet, and then they do a very in-depth look at your athletic department. What is your budget? How much of it do you self-generate? How much comes from the institution? How many tickets do you sell? What do your facilities look like? What's your academics? What's your APR? What's your one-loss record, your all-sports trophy, where do you stand? They do a pretty thorough analysis of everything. And again, that's something that maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago we weren't really high on some of those things that now we are up there. We're generating more money the last time I checked than all the public schools in Conference USA as far as ticket sales, fundraising, the money that you generate yourself. That's a pretty significant thing because we certainly weren't there 5 years ago. So I think again, our situation has changed, and certainly we have more friends in the room right now than we've ever had.
I realize this is a difficult question for you because, again, you don't get to make this decision. This is a decision that would be made by the administration. But would you be okay as the athletic director if there was some movement, American Conference loses a couple of folks, they choose Old Dominion and Charlotte, just for sake of argument, and now Conference USA, who I don't think would do anything, because they've got 14 schools and they'd be very comfortable with 12.
I think that's a very factual statement right there.
But if something happens and there's an opening there and they decide they want to do something, would you be okay in making that move knowing that your more immediate goal is a different conference? Or would you be better off staying right here until such time as the American's ready for you?
Well, it's kind of the same question you asked me before, quite honestly. It's going to be a very difficult decision that would take a lot of thought and a lot of information and a lot of dialogue with Dr. Savoie, because you're right, he has to be comfortable with it. It's not going to just be an athletic director's decision. But the bottom line is we would make the decision to do what's best for this university and positioning this university. And if that is to move on to a different conference, then I think that would be a hands down. It wouldn't be a hard decision at that point in time.
Scott Farmer, Ragin Cajun Athletic Director, is our guest. When we return, hey, let's do some comparisons. Let's talk about athletic departments and how the Cajuns in some areas compare with folks from CUSA, folks from the American Conference. We'll do it when we come back to Bird's Eye View after this on ESPN 1420 and .com.
With him, it's all about ABBA, American Idol, and Sandy Koufax. Jay Walker and Bird's Eye View on Sports Radio, ESPN 1420.
ESPN 1420, ESPN1420.com. Bird's Eye View. Jay Walker, Scott Farmer, Ragin Cajun Athletic Director, is our guest. Last time we had you on the show, it was right about the time a report that was commissioned by the administration, the public part of it was released. It was Mike Alden, former athletics director at the University of Missouri, conducted a study. I'm still not quite sure why they conducted the study, and perhaps one day somebody will explain it to me, but I don't know. But there were some things, there were some suggestions that were made as to how the university could do a better job of generating revenue, of finding ways to get caught up with the times, if you will, in some areas, and become a more self-sufficient functioning athletic department. And also in that report suggested a timeline. Most of them said right now. Some of them said 6 months down the road. During that conversation that I had with you some months back, the first thing that I noticed on there that appeared to be the priority was going to be the hiring of a minimum of another 4 administrators in order to start to get staff up to snuff. Now, I did a little research here. I took what the university has according to the website and the athletics directory, staff directory. Did the same thing with the University of North Texas, who's in Conference USA, and East Carolina University that's in the American Conference. You have 6 administrators, counting yourself, in the athletic department. North Texas has 11. East Carolina has 16. We could go on and on and on. You got a ticket guy. East Carolina has 5 ticket guys and 3 full-time salespeople to sell tickets. You've got 4 people in your academic department. East Carolina's got 8. You've got 3 full-timers in your sports information department. North Texas has 5, including someone who only does creative web design. You've got one video guy and an intern. They've got 4 full-timers. East Carolina's got 7, I think. Sports medicine, East Carolina's got 7 full-timers. You got 4. Okay, we go on and on and on. You want to be like the guys ahead of you or the guys that are way ahead of you, but it's hard to do if you ain't got the people. Now, are we any closer to hiring 4 new administrators for the athletic department than we were last time we talked? Have there been any conversations about it?
Well, yeah, there's been conversations, but we have to identify the funds to do that. And no, there's no funds available right now to hire 4 new administrators.
How much of that, Scott, is you've had so many budget cuts in the university itself?
Right.
You've had programs that have been discontinued. You've had faculty that's retired that haven't been replaced. You've had how much of that is, look, if I hire 4 new people in athletics, what am I going to tell people at the academic side? I mean, because that's something a president's got to fight.
That's a reality. Absolutely, Jay. You've hit one of the nails on the head. The other thing is look at what tuition and just a full scholarship, tuition fees, room, board, books. Look at the increases every year for the last 8 years. I mean, we're having to generate, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 additional dollars every year just to keep our scholarships up. So that's money that we're having to either sell more tickets or ask more RCF donations or what have you, just to stay the same. And so again, we have increased, and we just haven't been able to get ahead. We can go get more administrators. We get more administrators, we can increase even more. So it's kind of a catch-22, and we just happen to be trying to do these things in the worst economic times, and in my lifetime anyway. We've made great strides, but we're just not there yet. So yeah, there's 20 recommendations in the Alden report that you referenced, and literally the very first one talked about staffing. We're trying to do some of the other ones down below that one and try to get more money so we can go get that staff. That's what we're working on now.
There are a couple of things that, if I were to go ahead and prioritize, and I've never been an athletics administrator, so what do I know? But as I told you, I'm going to first guess, not second guess. The administrative staff, I mean, obviously, look, East Carolina, when you talk about total staff, you've got 31 people, and they've got double that. All right, so that ought to give people an idea of kind of where you compare with other universities in places where you're trying to be. One of the things that the Alden report talked about, you and I have talked about this, has been the ability to produce for media your own content to distribute to ESPN3. As Mike Alden said, you got all these sports networks, they're dying for inventory. In order to do that, you got to have the equipment to do it. Again, that costs money, but at the same time, is that money that you can afford to not spend? Yeah. I mean, again, this is just me, and I don't know everything. It would seem that that's something you almost got to do. You got to find the money for it.
That's right. And I don't think any of us would disagree with you at all. But in the research we've done, that's $3 million that I don't know where that's going to come from at this point in time. We're working on that. That is one of the things, absolutely. That's one of the recommendations, one of the things we're working on, because we can, if we can get that $3 million, we do think we can generate much more than that in a pretty quick time with trying to get our inventory out there. So, again, that is one of the recommendations. I had a meeting on it this morning on that one alone. And it's something that we're going to work with one of the consultants that worked with Mike Alden on that. We're trying to bring in here to help, let him help us navigate those waters.
What comes first, the chicken or the egg? And this is going to be the last question we have time for. There's also the talked about media rights and the things that you can conceivably do. Does that become a moot point till you get the TV thing taken care of? Because they kind of go hand in hand, or do you flip-flop it and do one before the other? As an administrator, I'm not an administrator, so I don't know.
You have several factors that come into play. You have the potential for, again, televising all of your contests in a year. You have the radio potential, as you're so very familiar with. And then you have all the signage, and you have the the sponsorship, corporate sponsorship type. Obviously, a multimedia right holder would love to come in if you can offer all four of those things. And that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck. So when they sit down with potential sponsors or advertisers, they can tailor a package that includes radio, includes television, includes signage at the venue, includes sponsorship of a game, what have you. So that is what we are anticipating, that we are going to be told to try to bundle everything together and get the most bang for our buck.
Okay, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to make sure I'm interpreting this right. So are you telling me that the real answer is take care of the TV thing first? Because if you're not able to offer that as part of the multimedia thing, then it's not as attractive?
I would think that's probably a pretty fair assessment.
Okay.
That's what we're working on.
Scott Farmer, Ragin Cajun Athletic Director. Go sell some season tickets. What's your big priority between now and the start of football season?
Oh, there's no doubt. Selling season tickets, getting the word out there, and try to get the stands filled for these first three games.
I'm sure that there are folks sitting out there that say, I don't like all of Scott Farmer's answers.
I'm sorry. All I can say is we're moving this department forward, and I think we're in a much better place today than we were 5 years ago today. Scott
Farmer, Ragin Cajun Athletic Director, appreciate your time, as always. Let's do this more often. Maybe that'll help.
You make the call, Jay. I always appreciate you coming on.
All right, Scott Farmer, Ragin Cajun Athletic Director, I want you to stick around. The Sports Gap comes up next, and we go from talking athletics to talking terrible tunes, because it is Terrible Tune Tuesday. That comes up next on the Sports Gap on ESPN 1420 and ESPN1420.com.